Hi, and welcome to Divorce on Planet Earth, Kate Scharff's real-world advice for well-intentioned humans. And now, here's Kate.
Hi. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first episode with our co-host, Jane Prelinger, who I will introduce now. Actually, I will let you introduce yourself, Jane.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so happy to be here. I am a therapist. I've been in practice for about 20 years, seeing individuals and couples and sort of helping them through difficult life transitions.
And some of those transitions have been divorces.
Absolutely. I have dealt with divorce with many couples from both sides.
From both partners.
The person who actually wants to leave and the person who is being left. So I've seen it all.
Yeah, and I outed you in my pilot episode as having been through divorce a couple times yourself, both as a child and as an adult.
Absolutely.
So we share that. And you and I go way back.
Yes,
right?
we
as
do.
Friends and colleagues. So I'm thrilled to have you as part of this project.
Yes, we do. I'm so happy to be here, Kate.
So the format for our new podcast is that Jane and I are going to address a question posed by a listener or a reader of the blog that's been sent to us via email. We'll pick the topics as they come in, and also particularly the ones that speak to a lot of people or are particularly touchy or difficult to talk about or very infrequently talked about, even though they're common. I think today's falls in that category. Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us what we're working with today?
Yep. Today we're working with an email that comes from Dan. I'm going to read it to you, Kate. Okay. Dan says, "My ex and I have been divorced for over a year, but she's still pretty bitter. Whenever my kids come to my house, they hit me with questions like, 'How come you don't give mom any money?' Or comments like, 'Mom says you don't care about us. That's why you left.' I pay a ton of child support and alimony, and I didn't even initiate the divorce. She did. I know I'm not supposed to say bad stuff about my ex to my kids, and I don't want to put them in the middle. But am I just supposed to let this stuff go unaddressed? Help."
Oh, that's a really important and painful question. I hear this from a lot of people. I am hearing, they say, I am hearing horrible things about myself come out of my children's mouths when they come back to me from having spent time with their other parent. And it feels terrible, but I don't know what to do because I know that I'm not supposed to disparage my ex and I'm not supposed to put my kids in the middle and I don't want to do those things. I don't want to get down in the mud with her or him, but I don't want my kids to think that I'm the villain either. It's a tough bind. I think that, this idea, this sort of golden rule of divorce that you're never supposed to disparage your ex in front of your kids can be taken too literally and too far by very well-intentioned people. If your ex is running you down in front of your kids, they are committing an act of child abuse as far as I'm concerned, right? Because we know that kids are identified with both of their parents. So if you say something bad about your co-parent, then you're really telling your child there's something wrong with them. And you are putting them in an emotional bind, right? You're saying, essentially, I don't want you to feel positively about your other parent. I don't want you to love them. I want you to make a choice. Even if you're not consciously aware, that's the message you're sending. So if you are hearing negative things about yourself that are significant, I mean, I'm not saying, I think you can afford to let small stuff slide. Mom says you drive too fast. I mean, if it's really not a systemic problem, I would let it go.
Pick your battles.
Pick your battles, absolutely. But if you're hearing comments like, that Dan is sharing with us that really go to the question of whether or not he loves his children or whether he's treating his ex fairly or contributing in an adequate way to the children's support, I think you're doing your kids a disservice by not taking this on directly. When a kid brings you this kind of information, what they're really saying is, help me understand how to process this negative information about you that I'm hearing from one parent I love when I love you too.
It's such a tough bind to be in. And from the point of view of the spouse who's trashing, though one hopes never to be that, kids, I find, can read your every eye twitch. Your eyebrow goes up and they're like, what are you saying about Daddy? It's really hard to hide in this situation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I agree with you completely. Even the best intentioned parent, when you're, especially early on, but even actually, for some time post split, is even when you're trying to do your best, you're right. Your kids are, exquisitely attuned to you. It's like they have little radar detectors on their heads for your shifts in your emotion, and they could pick it up. You're right, from an eyebrow twitch.
Yes.
So it's not a question of whether or not they're going to pick up the negative stuff. It's just a matter of how often and how you manage it.
Yes.
And I think we're going to probably end up talking about that a lot. But I think we're not talking about the sort of everyday, irritations that you broadcast to your kids, which frankly can happen in marriage and does, even in the best marriages, right?
Yes.
We're talking about whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously as the bashing spouse. It's an attack on your ex and collaterally on your children.
Yeah. Kate, I'm thinking about a situation in my practice where a little boy is dealing with this with his mom. Whenever he sees his dad, who is involved with a new woman, he has heard from his mom, "Oh, well, Daddy is involved with a woman who is old enough to be your babysitter. She's not the age of Mommy, but she could be your babysitter." And very disparaging remarks about the age of the new love interest in the dad's life. So I have found that has happened a few times where there are that kind of disparaging remark. One might be about the age of the person, or I have heard worse, sort of impugning the character of the new woman.
Okay, so that's a pretty common complaint that we hear from people who have repartnered. Of course, when you do choose someone much younger than your former spouse, then there is additional pain inflicted. Some people manage that particular injury to their pride better than others. It sounds like the client you're describing is divorced or divorcing someone who isn't able to take that pain and work it through somewhere else other than in her relationship with the child, which is really, hard to hear about. The other thing that's embedded in what you're saying is it's not really an attack on the girlfriend. I mean, it is certainly, and I'm sure the girlfriend experiences it that way, but it's an attack on the father.
That's right.
And on the child's relationship to the father.
Yes.
Right? So maybe that's a good one for us to work with to illustrate what I'm talking about. So I think people tend to err in one of two directions. One is to make light of the accusation, right? To minimize it in a kind of passive way. The other way that people err is to get angry and defensive and retaliatory. So, and then there is sort of a happy medium, which is what I call a protective response, which is one in which you empathize with the bind that the child is in. You say you wish that they weren't in it. You wish that your ex were not saying these negative things about you. You don't understand why. And then you offer some kind of corrective information that is, aimed at that child's age and stage and, capacity to take it in and make sense of it. Can you maybe sort of be the father for, share something that he might bring to you, a complaint? Look, I heard this from the kids.
Well, yeah, I have heard, let's say, this particular father say, "I don't know how to handle this because this is my new life. I'm not going to hide it, but I find my son is shunning the woman in my life. He won't speak to her. He has little bits and pieces of quotes, which can only come from his mom, have come out of his mouth. They're not things that my 9-year-old son would think of on his own.
Right.
So I have a lot of difficulty handling it. And sometimes he says he actually loses his temper. And the one he loses his temper on is this kid.
Okay, the dad loses his temper.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's furious with his wife, but the son is behaving provocatively.
Yes.
And so his son is getting it. And also the father's feeling really powerless. And it's moved in your situation, in the situation you're describing, from just speaking badly about the new partner, but behaving badly toward the new partner.
Absolutely.
Which is a whole other level of difficulty.
Yeah.
And needs to be addressed along with the feelings. The behaviors need to be addressed, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So I guess what I would say is that the first thing that dad needs to remember is that these are words that are being planted in his son's brain. In other words, the son is being sort of colonized. How old is this boy?
9.
9. Okay. That's an age that's particularly vulnerable. Little kids have a hard time holding on to sort of bad thoughts about their about either parent in the presence of that parent, assuming they're already attached.
Yes.
As they get older and head toward adolescence, they're more vulnerable. So I think he ought to try to stay away from being critical of the boy and think, okay, I'm really speaking to a part of the boy that is highly influenced by his mother, but he really loves his mother and he's in a bad bind because he's being essentially told the message, if I love my father's new girlfriend, or if I have a relationship with her, then I might lose my mother's approval or even her love. That's the unconscious message, right?
Right.
And if dad can hold on to that, then he can maintain empathy for his child.
What's tricky here, though, is that, and what worries me, is I see the dad now starting to identify the kid with this punitive mother. And I worry, and the kid looks like the mom. There are a lot of ways in which the mom resonates through this kid, and I worry about that relationship.
Right. So the work then that you'll have to do with him is remembering, is getting him to understand that this is the mother's way of getting to him through the child, of weaponizing the child, essentially.
Yes.
And maintaining the marital dynamic in the divorce through the child.
Yeah.
So I think that the best way to handle this with the son is to sort of the next time he hears the son say something negative about his new partner, about the girlfriend, or treat her badly, maybe not in that moment, but in a calm moment, say, look, I understand that you have a lot of feelings about, let's say, Jessica. And I've heard you talk about how young she is. I've heard you say a variety of nasty things about her. And now I've actually seen you be quite rude to her. It's my sense that your mom has a lot of feelings about Jessica and has talked to you about them and about Jessica's being too young, about her being more appropriate as a babysitter than as a potential stepmother. I don't know why your mom says those things. I wish she didn't, because I think it's very confusing to hear negative things about one parent who you love from another parent whom you love. I'm sorry that you're in that situation. I know there are a lot of changes going on here, and it's hard for everyone, but I love you, and Jessica, cares about you too, but she's not trying to be your mother. She never will be. I hope that you and I can figure out a way to have some time alone together and to include Jessica, increasingly over time.
Yeah.
That would be the protective response, because it takes into account, the fact that the child is in a terrible position, doesn't attack the child, but sets up, and doesn't disparage the ex either, but acknowledges that what the ex is doing is destructive and that he sets limits and boundaries and expectations for how he would like the child to behave going forward. The fact that he is angry at the child, which is completely understandable, might leave him vulnerable to one of the other less productive ways of responding. So he might become sort of passive and try to minimize it because he feels guilty about his anger. Like he might say, it's hard to get used to a new person in your life, but, give her a chance, buddy. And, I'm sure your mother means well, but she's going through a lot, right?
Right.
Not particularly helpful.
Yeah.
Doesn't address the problem the child's in, doesn't call him to task, nothing. Doesn't reassure him. Or he could just act out of the anger and say, listen, your mother has got to get over it and get a grip and get a life. And she has no business saying these things to you about Jessica. And, the sooner you can get on board and be nice to this woman who is going to be in my life for the rest of my life, the sooner we'll be able to get along, get on with
Right.
things.
And unfortunately, that is a pretty common response.
It's a common response. It's an understandable response, but it's a response that just tightens the noose around the child and is ultimately destructive of not just the child's self-esteem, but of the relationship that you're trying to strengthen with your own child.
Kate, that was really helpful. So let's now bring it back to Dan and his question.
Great idea.
Okay, his question was, as you remember, when his kids come to the house, they hit him up with questions about money and things they've heard from their mom. Why don't you give mom more money? Or mom says you don't care about us. That's why you left. So Dan feels frustrated and doesn't know how to address these questions. How about this scenario?
Okay, so let's start with the protective response, the one that some version of this I think addresses the child's underlying concerns, addresses the bind that the child is in, and frankly doesn't let the accusations stand, right? So Dan might say something like, wow, that must have been really hard to hear. Again, that's always the response, the validation of how hard it is to hear. That must have been really hard to hear that, mom feels that I'm not taking financial care of her and of you in the way that I'm supposed to, and that I don't care about you. That must have been really hard and confusing, since you love and care about mom, and you need to trust what she says, and you love and care about me and need to trust what I say, and that I'm going to be there for you. I wish mom hadn't said that about the money. That's not actually accurate. I do contribute very much to your household with both your mother and with me, and to your needs, as does she. And I care about you deeply. I would not get into the question of who did or didn't initiate the divorce, although I'm sure that really makes this stick in Dan's craw a whole lot more. Yes. But I would hold on to those feelings, but I would say your mom and I decided we couldn't be married to each other anymore, but that never happens between kids and parents. And I'm sure if we could, we'd both live with you 100% of the time, but that can't be true. So I'm sorry that your mother said that. I don't know why she puts you in that position. I wish she didn't, but I love you very much. I think about you even when you're not here, and nothing about that is going to change. If he were feeling really angry at the mom and we're going to say something retaliatory, he might say something like, I can't believe your mother said that. I pay a ton in child support and alimony. I didn't even ask for this damn divorce. Right. And how dare she say, I don't love you? If anything, she doesn't love you, or she wouldn't say things like that. That would be a terrible response, but kind of understandable, and maybe what he's saying in his head, right? Yeah. The passive response, equally unhelpful, would be to say, your mom is worried about money. I know things are tighter since the divorce. I'm sure she's just worried, and, she didn't mean what she said. And maybe she's feeling a little hurt, and that's why she said, I don't care about you, but I do. And I actually care about her too, right? It's just the opposite side of the same coin. Doesn't address the bind that the kid's in, doesn't redress the misinformation, and doesn't make it clear that even though you're not disparaging the ex, you're not going to parent in the way that they do, that they can count on you to be honest and trustworthy. Yes, that's really helpful, Kate. And you know what I'm thinking? This old saw that sometimes actually my clients find very helpful to remind themselves of, which is, you got to love your kids more than you hate your spouse. That is a very good point. Yeah. That's a great phrase to sort of use as a trope when you feel furious, which is going to happen. It's a good mantra. Okay. Well, you and I we thought about different ways for ending our show. And we talked about wanting to share some thoughts with our listeners, not the sort of platitudes that you and I remember hearing when we were getting divorced. This sort of these inspirational gems that people would drop on us, like, everything happens for a reason. That's probably my least favorite. You'll look back on this and laugh, but I don't think so. I don't know that I'll ever laugh. Right? Oh gosh, right? or, we never liked him anyway, which I don't know why people think that's
right.
going to make you feel better.
Right. The choice you made was really bad
right.
originally.
Right.
Yes.
And by the way, you shouldn't be sad because he sucked.
Yes. I never told you, but I couldn't stand him
They
ever.
say that. They say that. We never liked him.
Right.
Well, okay. Well, I'll just get up off this couch and put down my Haagen-Dazs and,
yes.
Remember
there you
that.
go.
Right. So we thought we would share a couple of our own thoughts as a way of ending, and we decided to call these our little spliticisms.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, like in divorce, we'll have different feelings on different days, and some days we might feel like saying something serious, and some days a little bit more silly. But I will share with you my little spliticism for today.
Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, here it is. People who tell you that regular exercise will make you feel less depressed are right. Endorphins.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard. But if you have been in bed for 24 hours and you feel like staying there for the rest of the weekend or the rest of your life, and you manage to haul your butt to the couch from the bedroom, that in my book, that rate's about the same as a full hour of hot yoga.
Well said, Kate.
Okay.
I think my words of wisdom, my spliticism for the day is this. Since we are on the couch, Kate, my spliticism is Toy Story or anything on Lifetime Movie Network. It's very good to watch on a Saturday afternoon in your bathrobe with or without a pint of ice cream.
I can't believe you said Toy Story. 1 or 2?
Oh, Toy Story 2.
2. You know what? I think that is the best movie ever made.
It is pretty intense.
It
really is.
Also, Tootsie. Very good for... I don't know. These are my...
Tootsie. Or what's that one about the monsters?
Monsters Inc. Well, Tootsie's not a Pixar. Monsters Inc. Also very good Pixar.
I just adore Monsters Inc. There's something about those characters that I really feel I can relate to.
Well, and they're conquering the fear in the closet, right?
You've been listening to Divorce on Planet Earth, Kate Scharff's real-world advice for well-intentioned humans. You can follow Kate on Facebook and Twitter at Divorce for Humans. That's at Divorce, 4, Humans. And if you have any questions or show suggestions, Kate would love to hear from you. Send her an email to info@divorceonplanetearth.com. That's info@divorceonplanetearth.com. And also, please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and get notifications about Kate's latest episodes. Thank you for listening.